Do you think this is a way of softening the reality to the public when NASA finally admits that they never made it to the moon? So they have these little movies in there making fun of it, just to soften the effect if they actually come out and say, no, we actually never went to the moon. Because they're just quiet. Everybody else has an opinion. NASA is just absolutely quiet.
Yeah, they are. They're not saying a thing. They're not doing anything.
And if they actually did it, if they actually went to the moon and they have this technology and none of it is an illusion and everything they claim they can do is an actual fact, then they would just come forward and say, here, we will show you. They can't do it. They can't even give us a decent image from space.
No, they can't.
Not a decent one of the Earth, not a decent one of the moon, nothing.
It's all CGI.
And just turn around and claim that Voyager, there's a fantasy in itself. Voyager 1 is up and active, and it does even more than it ever did, right?
Yeah.
There was an article I was reading in it. Oh, it just found 300 objects in space. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it found these 300 objects, and it's sending details back on it, which it doesn't have the capability of doing, never had it to start with, and doesn't have any kind of power. And the reality is, if it was there, it would be sitting in at least minus 270 degrees Celsius. None of the equipment's going to work. The vacuum, you're out there, you're into toward of the minus 17 to 19, right? Everything would cold welded itself together a long time ago. If it was actually there, that is the reality. The fact is, it's never been there. It probably landed in the Atlantic Ocean years ago, just after takeoff.
There's everything else landed in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. And Bozos is the only one that can go find this stuff.
Well, so far, he's the only one who's dragged anything out of the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
That's a pretty amazing feat.
Yeah, it is. What is it, 14,000 feet down he found it?
3.5 miles, yeah.
Extraordinary. The ability to pull that out of the Atlantic.
And have no idea where it is.
No. Yeah, he got lucky with that. We did some calculation as to where the rocket would have gone, because we saw the flight of the rocket as it left the launch pad. So he knew roughly where it was. It's just a matter of patience waiting to find it.
If the object is 42 miles in the air when it starts to fall back down, you have no idea the actual distance it's still traveling. There's no flight path on the first stage. There's no way to ID it. There's no ping signal or anything else that they put out for it.
Oh, they got lucky. Same way they found the Titanic. It was about the same depth. They eventually found it. Was it about 40 years ago?
Yeah. Well, they had a pretty good idea where it was located. The only thing they're going to have is a little bit of drift as it was going down underwater. But they had a pretty good idea where it was located.
They spotted the iceberg it hit, didn't they?
Oh, yeah, it's just floating by. Just
the iceberg melted.
That's like the guy had a really good day fishing, and he's going to go out the next day, and his buddy says, well, how do you know where you were fishing at? And he says, it's okay. I put an X on the side of the boat.
It's about what NASA do, isn't it?
Yeah.
X marks the spot.
Yeah.
Most people do not have really too much of a problem with NASA faking the moon landings. That's not really the issue. Because if you accept that they faked the moon landings, and if NASA come out and say, well, sorry, guys, we did it. We showed you what we showed you, but it was not real. We don't have a problem with that now. It's what else we've been lied to about that people have a real problem with. And that's why NASA can't front up. So they're going to dribble out these sort of stories like Fly Me to the Moon. There'll probably be other ones coming as well, the other amusing rom-coms, I think it's called, or funny movies. Oh, look, NASA faked the moon landings. Ha, 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 they'll say.
They'll probably put a series together on Netflix first.
Yeah, they probably will.
And have a whole series on fantasy spaceflight because there's a large viewing audience. Why not put one together?
Yeah.
It would be a successful series to put it out there.
Definitely.
And I mean, you could even throw in some of the 1960s sitcoms to go in there so that you've got I Dream of Jeannie content in there and Bewitched and all the other stuff that magically happens, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They could make a hell of a series out of it.
Oh, you could. You could do very well out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think somebody's probably deciding that at the moment. Because if this film, Fly Me to the Moon, is successful, and I'll be interested to see how many people are in the audience and what the reactions are. Be interesting to see it.
Be interesting to ask some of them at the end.
I will certainly do that. I'm idiot enough to try. Somebody would probably go whack.
Bring a few copies of Nexus magazine and sell a few at the door on their way out.
Well, I could. I mean,
there you go.
The deathbed confession issue. Yeah, we got that. So we found out where it was all filmed, or some of it was filmed. Probably Apollo 11 and probably Apollo 12 as well were filmed there. Cannon Air Force Base, if anybody wants to know, go and check it out. And then Hangar 1 down at Menlo Park.
I still say that all of the outdoor shots that they did were done at Flagstaff. I mean, it was so well mapped. They had surveyors out there. They had all kinds of stuff. They spent hours designing just the blast craters that they put in there. When you think about the detail that they went to put that in there, and even the timing of when the blast went off, so one crater would look older than another. Then they could fly over that and take pictures of it and then create their plaster models.
That's what they did.
Well, you know, when you look at the film industry, you do things the easiest way that you can because you're on a time constraint. Yeah. You have money to worry about, you have a budget to worry about, but NASA didn't have that. So the way I look at it is this. You want to do things the easiest way. You already have the craters blown. You have the crane up there. You have all the lighting you need. You have the generator station right there. You have everything there. You have the rovers there. You have the astronauts there. You have the spacesuits there. You have everything all in that one location. So why not use it? Pretty simple to me.
Yep, makes sense. Makes sense. Just change the background a bit, put a few other mountains in.
You could actually drop blackout blankets right from that crane. Now you have a nice black sky. And they only have to drop them so far because it's not going to pick up any stars up there if they're doing it at night. If they're doing it at daytime, well, then they just drop the blackout blankets just like a curtain that you would have in a movie theater. They're probably rolled up on top of that crane anyways, and they just let them down on a reel. Now you have it all blacked out. So you got a beautiful black sky. And then on the inside of the crane, as we displayed in the last video, when you look up at the top of it, you could sit here and count the lights that they had up there. There's massive amounts of lights on top of that crane because they needed to use it when they were practicing at night. And we have some of those night shots as well on the movies. So I would say, yeah, they probably did it all there. At least the outdoor stuff.
Like all of the stuff that they need to go along with that is a good caterer and a little entertainment. And I mean, they had Frances Northcott. I mean, Poppy, they just put her in a bikini and away they go, right?
Oh, she was good.
They had all of that there. When I'm looking at the pictures, I'm looking for a pizza box. I mean, I found the beer can. I got the beer can. Where are the pizza boxes?
Well, we found a couple of cigarette butts.
A few golf balls as well.
Oh, yeah, not to mention the golf balls. There's hundreds of them everywhere, right? And baseballs. And, of course, that's even in the cue cards for Apollo 12. All of that content's in the cue card. Don't forget the baseball, right, is in the cue cards, right? Yeah. And you got the little cartoons. Alan Bean's doing the cartoons, right? And he's got a baseball glove on. And then he says, I'll be able to get out of this suit and get into my tennis sneakers. It's all in the cue cards.
You guys are going to find this a little bit funny. We were talking about the Apollo funnies. When you put these two together, which I'll just show you here, it is kind of humorous because when you put these two together, what it shows is it shows one fella, Jack Schmidt here, he doesn't have a bubble helmet in there. Well, we already went over that last week. Yeah. But watch what happens when you put these two together. And I just thought this was kind of funny.
Yeah, no bubble helmet.
So now you can see why they would not have a helmet in there, because let's face it, they smoke like chimneys.
Yeah, yeah, there he is. He's smoking. Where's the helmet? Dear, oh dear. And of course, Jack Schmidt became a U.S. Senator, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He did.
Well rewarded for what he did.
Yeah, he started out as a geologist.
Well, he's a geologist in the Senate.
He was a geologist for Apollo so they could describe all of the moon rocks that are listed in the cue cards. He's the one that wrote that up. And of course, when they went on tours around to the different states and to Antarctica to gather unusual rocks so they could place them on the set for them to gather up and then have that little EO, enthusiastic observations, right, in the cue cards.
That's right.
When they're picking up the stuff, all of that is put in there and practiced over and over again. And Harrison Smith was part of that team because they had Farouk Al-Bez in there. He was the time management specialist, the distance between stations, each of the stations that they were practicing on. And Harrison Smith was there as the geologist to help them describe the different materials that are in the rocks that they so-called were finding, which were brought from various countries, including Canada and Antarctica, wherever they're gathering them from. And of course, when they were in California gathering a few rocks, they accidentally got some petrified wood mixed in there.
Yeah, that was a pity.
And of course, that could have a little bit of petrified whatever in there too. Looks like cookie dough, petrified from here. But it could be a moon rock.
Look, they had 400,000 people working on Apollo. You think they get some decent rocks?
You would think.
Yes.
When you hire a geologist, he should be able to distinguish between a piece of wood that's petrified. But apparently he didn't. And they still made him a senator.
I think what happened was somebody, when they were cleaning that up, I think somebody switched it. It got stolen. I think the real rock got stolen and that was replaced with that wood. That's what I think happened.
They could have just made a mistake and had it in there. They were looking for unusual rocks, stuff that would be considered alien, because it's very easy to identify a lot of rocks, like straight granite and everything else on this earth. You know, sandstone, limestone, you name it. They wanted to have, you know, volcanic rocks, which are very unusual that they didn't use, but they were finding different types of rocks on this planet to use for practice demonstrations. And I believe those are the same rocks that they all of a sudden said, well, here, this is what we brought back.
But anyway, if you look at the timeline of Apollo 11 that was, none of the astronauts had access to any of those rocks when they did that tour. The rocks were in quarantine. Nobody knew what they were. So they couldn't have presented them with anything. I mean, it's a great story. And it's yet another part of the whole Apollo humor. You know, oh, let's fool everybody with a piece of petrified wood. No, it was a genuine mistake. So let's not get too tied up with people finding bits of rock in somebody's effects after they had died. Well, it was whether it was a genuine mistake or it was a deliberate bit of humor, I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
The other thing is NASA likes to throw in stuff because they lost chain of custody of the rocks, an entire filing cabinet, and just
what's that? Yeah, there we go.
Rocks in a filing cabinet were removed. They lose chain of custody. So whatever they claim that they got back, are they the real rocks? Because they have no idea.
No idea at all. They may well have been switched because moon rock would fetch a lot of money on eBay when it was going to be invented a few years later. And I'm sure that somebody would say, oh, I've got a bit of moon rock. Yes, I got a piece of moon rock. Come on, guys, here it is. Lovely piece of moon rock, that one. Come and get it if you want, you know, $1 million, something like that. That'll do me. $1 million, piece of moon rock.
Well, you see, they lose the chain of custody of everything.
Yeah, and if they do come and get it, I'll know it's real.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they got petrified cookie dough for it.
Yep.
But you look at all the films, they lose chain of custody. Oh, they're just left in a vacant McDonald's. They didn't have custody of those films. The only thing is with the films is you look at it and you know that they shot it on their simulated set because you can go back and match what's in the videos.
And anybody who dares question that, you have to explain how an optical printer works and how that creates images. That's what an optical printer does, and it does it very well. Optical printers been around for about 100 years. People knew how to use them. So obviously, if you're going to use film and you're going to create film to show something different from what the film actually recorded, you'll use an optical printer to create it. End of story.
Yeah, and you can make Superman fly really easy.
Yeah, of course you can. You know, you can get helicopters flying into buildings very easily. Oh, you can get gorillas climbing the Empire State Building too. You can get dinosaurs taking kids around Jurassic Park. For real, obviously, what it looks like. And you can get big sharks coming at boats. You're going to need a bigger boat. That was a big shark, that one. Very big shark. And it took a lot to get rid of it, didn't it?
When it grabbed a hold of the back of the boat and chewed him up, that was a pretty big shark.
It was a very big shark, yes. Yeah. I mean, it was really scary. You know, we're watching it. Are they going to survive? It was good. It was all fake, of course. Rather like the moon landings, all faked.
Now, if you would have put music behind the moon landings, then it really would have been suspenseful, just like Jaws. You know, it was the music that made that. I mean, that really made it, right? You knew something was going to happen. You just didn't know when.
No, exactly. That was the suspense. But he could put the music behind Apollo 13, couldn't they? Are they going to get back? Are they going to survive? Big suspense.
They really came up a cropper on that one, didn't they? They could have really had a good show out of that if they would have added music to it.
Well, yeah. Well, they got 6 Oscars out of it.
And Neil got a star.
Neil got a star, yeah.
When you look at the Hollywood Walk of Fame, you have to notice that there's little round plaques on it right below the star. Now, what that does is it indicates what field of the entertainment industry they were in. Now, if you have a little, like it's a round gong with a stick beside it, well, that's the music industry. If you have a television with an old-fashioned camera by it, well, you're in the movie industry. And if you have a television on it, that means you're in the television industry. Guess which one Armstrong has on it?
Go on, which one?
The television industry. That's the television with the 2 rabbit ears on it. Television industry, he's an astronaut.
I mean, it doesn't have a NASA logo or a rocket symbol or anything?
No. You look at Sammy Davis Jr., he has the gong with the stick by it because he was a musician mostly. So what's Armstrong doing with a television with 2 rabbit ears on it?
It was shown around the world. It was one of the biggest shows that had ever been produced at the time. He was a big star. So where's he buried? He's buried at sea. Why is he buried at sea? Because he didn't want a fuss. Why not? He's famous. He's rich. He's known around the world. But no, he doesn't want a fuss. Oh dear, oh dear.
Well, maybe he had an affinity with Jacques Cousteau.
Ah, that could be
He
it.
wanted to swim with the fishes.
Swim with the fishes. Well, he's doing that right now in his lead-lined coffin. So he's not going to get radiated in the bottom of the Atlantic off coast of Florida, is he?
Nope.
A lead-lined coffin. Who has that? We don't know. I don't know. What, does Collins have a lead-lined coffin?
Francis Northcott's still alive.
Collins died April 2021, aged 90. Well,
Yeah.
they do last a long time, these astronauts.
Radiation preserves them.
Well, something must preserve them. I mean, Aldrin's still around. He's 93.
Well, yeah, but he was pickled, so he's better preserved.
That's probably true, yes. Yeah. Oh, dear.
All that moon bacteria just helped preserve him. Must be the alien influences.
Well, if those guys really did go to the moon, that would mean that they probably would have had cancer, every last one of them. Look at cancer today. It's an epidemic. And a lot of these scientists are saying that it's because the ozone layer is getting thinner. And what's happening now is that all these rays are getting in. You remember on the beaches, right? Like 68 and 60. I mean, we were in California at the time. You didn't really have to put on much suntan lotion at all. And you could stay out in that sun for a couple of hours. You're not going to have much of a problem. Try doing that now and see what happens. And I still say that these Apollo astronauts, if they would have actually made it to the surface, I think all of them would have had cancer by the time 2000 came around.
If you were walking on the lunar surface that has been constantly irradiated, they're sitting there bringing that dust inside the vehicle. They were inhaling it because they're in 0 gravity when they're flying around. There'd be dust flying around inside the cabin on the way back. The dust that was on their suits would then become, in a 0 gravity situation, they'd have to have masks on not to breathe it in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, that's going to be like breathing in fiberglass insulation without a mask.
And you take a look at the shots of Cernan in Apollo 17 where the dust, he's just covered in dust all over his face and everything else. That's highly irradiated dirt if it was from the lunar surface. And not only that, you have radiation bombarding that surface from the sunlight and it's reflecting off. And of course, that creates microwaves and X-rays as well. When one surface hits the other like that, and there are documents claiming that the astronauts would be cooked.
But surely that in itself will prove that they were never on the moon. If they got so covered in dust, which I think was a special effects just to prove they were there to the audience who were watching it. But if it was as radioactive as that, and there's no reason to believe it isn't, they would be dead. If they're inhaling it, it's all over their skin, and that would prove they couldn't possibly have been there, and it was just special effects.
Well, like I said, if you take the bow shock that's around the Earth and the radiation that's being moved by the Van Allen belts, by the electromagnetic shielding that we have around the Earth, there's none around the moon. So all of that is concentrated. That bow shock is going to be right at the surface.
Right. Now let's have a look at what ChatGPT has to say about this.
Of course.
I asked ChatGPT, is the lunar surface, the regolith, radioactive? And it says yes. Lunar regolith, the loose layer, heterogeneous material covering solid rock on the moon's surface, is indeed subject to radiation. The moon does not have a substantial atmosphere or magnetic field to protect it from space radiation, so the regolith is constantly exposed to various types of radiation. 1. Solar radiation. The moon is continuously bombarded by solar wind, which consists of charged particles such as protons and electrons emitted by the sun. These particles can penetrate the lunar surface to various depths depending on their energy. 2. Galactic cosmic radiation. Galactic cosmic rays are higher energy particles originating from outside the solar system. These particles, including protons and heavier nuclei, can also penetrate the lunar surface and contribute to the radiation environment. And thirdly, secondary radiation. When primary particles from the solar wind or cosmic rays strike the lunar surface, they can produce secondary particles through interactions with the regolith. These secondary particles can include neutrons, gamma rays, and other particles that contribute to the overall radiation levels. Now, if you want to say implications for lunar missions, it says radiation exposure for astronauts. Let's have a look at this one. Astronauts on the moon are exposed to higher levels of radiation than on Earth due to the lack of protective atmosphere and a magnetic field. This exposure is a significant consideration for the duration and safety of lunar missions. Well, isn't that interesting?
Wow.
And yet you can take an X-ray right through any of the spacesuits. And that cosmic radiation is estimated at be 9 meters or something like that, penetration into the surface? Well, if it can penetrate through 9 meters of soil, how much protection do you need to have in a suit to protect that from happening?
Oh, about the same distance of lead, I should think.
It's going to need quite a few inches of lead around the suit, in the suit. The amount of lead that they need to do would prevent a rocket from lifting off.
Oh, yeah, it wouldn't get off the ground at all. Far too heavy.
They're going to have to line the lander. They're going to have to line everything else. And with that much radiation, how would that affect the communication? All the electronics, the sensors that they claim they left on the surface is sending back signals. It's laying right on the surface. It's exposed to the direct sunlight. How the hell is that stuff supposed to work? How would the antennas possibly work?
It works because NASA says they work. And we've got to believe NASA every time they speak. Now, if you don't believe NASA, and it stands for never a straight answer, you're getting part of the way through solving this problem. NASA don't tell the truth about anything very much. It's sad. It's one of those uncomfortable truths that once people have accepted is real because they see it and hear it with their own ears and eyes, they'll begin to understand how it can be easy to identify NASA's fraud, fictionalization, and fabrication of Apollo. It's not rocket science. It's just reality, logical thinking.
The rocket science just gets you into the Atlantic.
Yeah. It's a good thing the Atlantic is about 15,000 feet deep, and it's hard to find these things that they dumped there. It was unfortunate the Russians managed to pick up one before it sank. Command module, that is, from Apollo 13. That was the real problem with Apollo 13. The film and the rest of it was all fake. Good story.
Yeah, I still have a thing that they fantasized the whole thing because they couldn't organize the astronauts. They probably weren't cooperating enough to fake it, to go out and shoot the scene. So they said, well, then we'll fake it this way.
Well, they saw what happened to Gus Grissom, so they probably got back into line.
Yeah.
And before anybody starts talking about, well, there were 400,000 people who worked on Apollo, yes, there were. They were doing the best job they could. They knew nothing of any of this. Look, it's taken us over 50 years to find the answers, to find the problems. Do you think those 400,000 people knew what was going on? Of course they didn't. They watched it on television, same as we did. Well, same as I did.
Well, there was nothing available for 30 years.
Yeah, nothing at all.
There's nothing available other than the little bits of stuff that NASA have put out to the media. You didn't have access to the files. As soon as the 30th anniversary came up there and they put stuff for the first time online, uploaded the photographs, uploaded the PDF files, did the big 30th anniversary stuff, and that was put together. The University of Indiana put that together, and I managed to download a CD of that entire presentation of the thing with the PDF files, the original PDF files in that. When you start looking at it and you realize that those people, because it's already 30 years later, were simply scanning the documents. They're not reading them. They're scanning the photographs. They're not looking at them. And all of the mistakes, anybody that went through and tried to remove any anomalies that might have been in there, you know, like somebody took a few pictures of them while they're taking a break on the set, right? And have a Playboy bunny on their lap, which we knew were there because it's in the cue cards.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
They had a birthday party for one of the astronauts and they brought Playboy bunnies to that set. And it's listed in there. And even have their favorite Playboy bunny, the 4 pictures of the Playboy centerfolds are there. That's all there. Like I said, if we saw party balloons in the photographs, they would have taken pictures of those people while they were doing that. Well, it was being catered to and everything else. And they're bombing around in their Corvettes on the set, you name it. That all would have been there. Those pictures would have been removed because they're way too obvious. If an astronaut had taken his helmet off to take a break and have a smoke, that would be removed. But they missed a whole lot of other stuff. The stuff that they missed is in those photographs. And that is the real documentation of what happened for the Apollo missions. The photographs are there because they are taken on Earth.
Of course they were. All the photographs were taken on Earth because we now know film will not operate.
And when you look at it and you realize that they didn't even bother to build operating pieces of it, like the only thing that you see in the photographs that are functional is the rover's functional as far as being able to drive it, and the cameras are functional. Everything else is just a mock-up. The experimental equipment, just take a good look at it. There's nothing there. There's just some aluminum framing and some foil around it. You take a look at the LEM, it's just a mock-up. It's an empty shell sitting on the surface. Couldn't possibly function as a real machine. That's why there's no blast crater. That's why there's no legs on the compression. That's why Buzz Aldrin is up against the door frame, because there's nothing inside the vehicle. And when you look very carefully at it, they couldn't possibly get out face down and come out on their belly out of there when you've got a 10-inch PLSS on your back and you're sitting in at least another 12 inches for the console. Your knees are up against the base model. It comes up 20 inches and then the rocket engine is there. You can't bend over and bend backwards to get around to get your legs out that way. Your body doesn't go that way. The only way they'd be able to get out if that equipment was in there is one astronaut would have to be up on top of the engine, and the other guy would have to be on his back and go out on his PLSS to get out that door. You have to slide out on his back. Once he gets out there, he's going to have to try and figure out how to turn around so he can get down the ladder. That would be one hell of a chore. And you've seen the videos of them when they're on the Vomit Comet and the astronaut lands and he's on his back and he can't get off his backpack to turn over on his own. Well, that's what would happen to them.
Yeah, of course it would. It's just a matter of thinking it through. And all these NASA fanboys, they don't think these things through. They just take what is told to them at face value. Makes no sense at all. It's not even worth listening to them because they don't know what they're talking about. They got no realistic ideas behind it. I mean, when I first started doing this, Apollo was fake. I was doing public presentations. And this was in the days when I had to use an overhead projector because I was copying some of the pictures out of books. That was the only thing I could start with. I then created overhead slides using an overhead projector. Remember those? I've been doing this for 30 years, for goodness sake. And more people are now beginning to realize that what we've been talking about is reality. It's not fiction. Apollo was fiction, and they're beginning to see that. To see that.